KLIF News talking with Mr. Alan Adelson, who is the attorney for the Ruby Estate from Detroit, Michigan. Mr. Adelson, you were in Dallas today talking with several persons. One, Dr. Earl Rose, the Dallas County Medical Examiner. Are you and the family pretty well satisfied as to what the autopsy report showed?
Yes.
Also with us today, Mrs. Eva Grant, who's a sister of Jack Ruby. Eva, do you feel that there is criminal neglect in the case of Jack Ruby, him being confined in the Dallas County Jail before he was taken to Parkland Hospital?
I will say this. I have been hollering around the county building that Jack needs medical attention last summer, and I was told that if he needed medical attention, he'd get it. Even so far as I had Phil Burleson talk to the sheriff, and he said if Jack needs to be in the hospital, he'd go. During the week of Labor Day, Jack evidently saw the doctor, and it was the first time Jack told me to bring him some Pepto-Bismol that Dr. John W. Callahan suggested, and I did. After 5 or 6 weeks, Jack told me it's not helping. I'm throwing up every day, and this was about the 3rd or 4th month. He says, and I said, are you eating? He said, what's the good of eating? I'm throwing up. In my opinion, any doctor looking at Jack, and he looked so pasty, should have given him a thorough examination and seen what's wrong. There's no doubt in my mind that Jack had cancer for many months. I will say this. This doctor does not pay attention to the people in the jail. In April of 1966, he compiled a bunch of questions for the newsmen. He brought them up to Jack, and when Jack refused to answer him, following week, Dr. Callahan approached my brother Sam, and he wanted him to take these questions up to Jack. And when my brother Sam refused to do it, Sam went directly over to Phil Burleson's office, and Phil composed a letter and had it registered and certified to Dr. Callahan to see that list of questions. And he said he wanted them sent to his office. Dr. Callahan ignored Phil Burleson. I must tell you, many times when I was in the press room, Dr. Callahan was with Jim Kerr of some station here, a newsman, and they were always in a little conversation. And the minute I entered the press room, which I came in there quite often, 2 or 3 times a week, their conversation stopped. I had told Jim to stay away from me. I'm not answering any questions. He's not with the district attorney's office, and should they decide to subpoena me, I always have plenty of answers for them. In fact, I have a few questions for them. Jack's complaint the day he was admitted to Parkland, and I must say this in all fairness, from the moment he was brought in, he was given their undivided attention. There was doctors in there every hour, and that evening of December the 9th, and that I saw Jack early that day. My brother did not see Dr. Callahan, or near did Dr. Callahan give my brother a shot of antibiotics, as he claimed over radio. About that. What can one say? You know, you approached me. I said, he's very sick. Lawyers approached me. How's Jack? I said, he looks terrible. He's very sick. They looked at me like, there's something wrong with my mind. I'll be honest about it. Even the sheriff. He thought I'm talking out of my mind. I said, Jack is physically sick. I went to see Jack October the 6th. That was the day after reversal. I came down, and I said, Jack is very sick. Well, they stared at me. You know what? My opinion that the people connected with the county jail thought I was talking out of my hat. I have complained so many times about Jack looking sick and being sick. I must admit one thing. Nothing was done. Pepto-Bismol they give to a dog.
Mrs. Grant, did the sheriff of Wichita Falls ever visit the Dallas County Jail to see Jack before the trial was transferred down there to Wichita Falls?
In my opinion, I had seen Jack December the 9th. That's the day Jack was admitted to Parkland. I saw him in the morning between 10 to 10 and 10:30. Later that afternoon, the visiting sheriff from Wichita Falls came to Dallas for one purpose, to see the security that Sheriff Decker had been providing for Jack. I guess he wanted sort of copy the same kind of security. He went up there with the sheriff and several deputies. Both of them saw Jack was very ill. When they returned to the sheriff's office, the visiting sheriff indicated Jack was very sick, and so did Sheriff Decker. Somehow they got Dr. Pickard to go up there. Dr. Pickard did come a-running, and he called for an ambulance. He said, you better get this man to the hospital quick. Later that evening, they announced he had pneumonia. They didn't know what it was. But the doctors at Parkland had a suspicion. And when I was there late that night, they told me that they thought there might be indications of cancer. But I do want to say this. What if the sheriff of Wichita Falls had not come here that day? That morning I complained around the county jail.
Well, Eva, you talked with Attorney Phil Burleson asking about a private physician to go in and check Jack over. What developed on that?
Well, let me tell you, Dr. Coleman Jacobson is a dermatologist, in all truthfulness. He's our friend, but he had visited Jack about 3 or 4 times a year, more on friendship basis. And I had spoken with him the night before, which would be December the 8th. He just arrived back in town after being away for 10 days on a medical convention. He said he'd sure and see Jack on Saturday. Well, when I got to Phil's office Friday after I visited with Jack, I complained to Phil to forget about due process of law. Jack looks like a dying man. Well, you know, Phil says don't get excited. I said, I'm not excited, I'm worried. I said, Jack looked like a ghost. He looked pasty. There's something wrong. He says, tomorrow Dr. Coleman will be there. I'll see that he gets in, and I'll see what we can do. Well, the next day didn't show up because late that afternoon Jack was taken to Parkland. And they did everything they could to keep Jack alive. They put nurses around the clock. I know the group of doctors, they're all very fine men. They devoted their undivided attention. They explained different things to me. I cannot complain one bit. Every doctor came and they did what they could, and I saw what they were doing. But I had a feeling that Jack wasn't going to be around too long. And the truth, Jack didn't either.
Well, Eva, from our conversations, it seems as though the death, in a sense, was expected but totally unexpected. You'd been talking with Jack just previous to the death, had you not?
I came into the room at 5 minutes to 9, and Jack was alive, and I said, Jack, we're here. Now, the purpose of us coming that early, we were going to make arrangements if we could get Henry Wade to permit us to take Jack to Chicago and let him die among his family and friends. Dr. Franklin said he would talk to the other staff men and see what arrangements could be made. In the meantime, Phil was going to see Henry Wade sometime during that day. Now, I went into the room at 5 minutes of 9. I was there maybe anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes, not too many minutes. And I said, Jack, we're here. He said, what'd you come so early? I said, we want to talk to you. And I'll go out because the girl was bathing him, the nurse. And I was gone about 20 minutes. I came back. They would not permit me back in the room. And the next time I saw Jack was 10:30, and he was dead.
Well, when they refused to let you back in the room, did you have any indication that he had turned worse?
I had asked the deputy, why can't I go in? He says, well, there's someone in there. I said, who's in there? He says, the doctors. So I just walked out of the corridor and went to this little room where the visiting room is, and I just waited there. And finally we saw the men coming from the sheriff's office, and Buddy Walters came with another man who assists the sheriff. And I knew when they're there something funny was going on, but they wouldn't answer any questions. Nobody did. The truth of the matter is, even in a manner where you expect someone to die, you know how bad off they are. When it happens, you're in shock. And they reported Jack probably went in this blood clot, and I'm sure he has cancer. I've read the report. I've been with Dr. Rose this afternoon. He spent 1 hour and 40 minutes. He explained it to me. He knows I know nothing about medicine. This man done a great job on the autopsy, and there's no question in my mind that Jack had cancer. The only thing I believe he's had it many, many more months before December the 9th, and he had the symptoms of some serious disease. Anyone who throws up 4.5 or 5 months and has severe headaches and fever, they need medical attention.
Did Dr. Rose, by any chance, mention the fact that this could have been diagnosed any earlier than what it was?
Well, he said he wished he had. He says it can't tell. He did tell me this is the kind of cancer non-smokers get, and but it was spread so far he'd hate to say, but he said this type of cancer could have been anywhere from 4 to 15 months. He'd hate to specify too much on it.
You know, it has spread through his body.
Great deal. Well, now, when you talk to a man like Dr. Rose, you must remember that he gets the bodies when they're dead. He has been a practicing physician many years ago, but I'm sure everything he's done and the report is truthful. And he explained everything to me. I'm satisfied in my mind that Jack's had cancer, but how long, that's the question.
Eva, what was the response of the citizens of Dallas when Jack was admitted to the hospital? Did they show any regret or remorse that he was in there? Did they send any token of friendship to him?
Well, Jack received 30 or 40 cards from people that Jack knew. I would say I'm well acquainted with him, of cards of quick recovery. And being that it was near Christmas, he received many cards for Christmas and New Year's. All in all, I have I don't know if I have 4,000 to 6,000 cards, Christmas cards, New Year cards, recovery cards. I send a great deal of mail to Eileen and Earl for them to answer, and I've answered about 300 little letters and cards. I can't say that, I wouldn't say there was over 30 or 40 cards from Dallas. And these were people that we've known.
Mr. Adelson, why has the Wayne County Probate Court issued a show cause order to have Police Chief Charles Batchelor, Henry Wade, Bill Alexander, and Sheriff Bill Decker appear in Wayne County, Michigan, to show just cause for why they should not release personal effects that belonged to Jack Ruby?
Well, the Wayne County Probate Court took jurisdiction of this matter within a week of Jack's funeral, and thereafter the property being down here issued a show cause order that the persons who you mentioned should show cause why they shouldn't turn it over to the estate.
Have you talked with them to get them to turn it over before issuing this probate order?
No, we had the order. It's not an order. It's a question, more or less, serve the various parties with the papers.
Okay, Mr. Adelson, could you say release personal effects that belong to Jack Ruby. Could you name some of these personal effects?
Well, I believe there's his hat and his coat, or his suit, rather. There is the ring and his wristwatch, 2 suits that he had, and also, of course, the pistol that he used in the killing of Oswald.
Well, Mr. Adelson, you've talked with District Attorney Henry Wade. What was part of that conversation? Was some of it about Patrick Dean with the Dallas Police Department?
Yes. I myself have read much of the commission testimony, and the only big problem that I could see if there had to have been a retrial was the testimony of Sergeant Dean. Apparently Sergeant Dean, as he took Jack upstairs, as he took Mr. Sorrells upstairs to question Ruby, said something about Jack showed an intention on the previous Friday night, the day of the assassination, that Jack wanted to kill Oswald. And this, of course, would be incriminating testimony. I asked District Attorney Wade if he would allow Sergeant Dean to take a polygraph examination, to which he said yes. And I would like very much to have this done.
Do you have any idea when you would schedule such a test?
Oh, I couldn't say when. I'd have to get together with Mr. Wade again as to such a time. I think that an examination of this sort might clear quite a bit of questions up to a lot of people.
Well, Mr. Adelson, one thing that pops into my mind, and I saw and talked with Jack Ruby Friday night, that Lee Harvey Oswald was charged for murdering John F. Kennedy. And Jack was within 6 feet of Oswald, standing on a table with ample opportunity to shoot him if he wanted to. But our conversation was one of food for DJs at KLIF and telephone numbers and et cetera and et cetera. And at no time did he mention killing Oswald or even would like to kill Oswald. And should Patrick Dean know that Jack Ruby was in the police assembly room Friday night and it was closed to reporters only, why did he not make Jack leave, and why was Jack Ruby led into the basement of City Hall again?
The question that you just asked me was the same question that I put to Wade this morning. And he said, well, Jack had not formed his intent at that time. Well, if that were the case, I didn't want to say anything to Mr. Wade. If that were the case, how could Jack have said that to Dean on the day that he shot Oswald, that he had planned it Friday night? Wade's own words to me were that he did form his intention that night, and then he comes back and says he didn't form his intention that night.
So you think there is some discrepancy in Wade's statement?
I think Mr. Wade should think about it himself.
Mr. Adelson, have you read any of the Warren report?
Oh, just about all the testimony that pertained to Jack Ruby in it.
Did Henry Wade make any testimony?
Oh, yes, sure. He was in Washington along with Dean and Wagner Carr, the Attorney General of the state.
What about Henry Wade? Did he have any discrepancies in his testimony?
Just one small discrepancy. Apparently he had dinner twice the night that Kennedy was assassinated, because he said after the assassination he went out to Parkland Hospital to see his friend Governor Conley, who I believe he's a roommate with in the Navy, and then he went home for dinner. Then apparently he had some friends over, and he and his wife and the friends went down to the police station, or I should say he went in and they waited out in the car, and then he said about 7:30 he went to dinner, but that's the only discrepancy that he had in it.
Mr. Adelson, there has been some talk about the possibility of cancer being injected into Jack Ruby. Have you checked this out?
Oh, that's completely absurd. There's no possible way today's medical science whereby cancer, as I understand it, could be injected or induced into a patient or a subject. There has been a study up in New York. I've seen something about it, that where they have attempted to inject live cancer cells into animals. The animal throws the cell off, and it's something that must develop, as I understand it, in the body itself.
There are several things that are of interest concerning Jack Ruby. One is when Jack was on the witness stand in the federal court at Bryan and St. Paul, he sat down and stated, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am about to tell you the most incredible story ever told." He gazed about the courtroom and then said nothing. A couple of nights prior to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, a waitress at the Lucas B&B restaurant on Oak Lawn, just a couple of doors down from the Club Vegas that Jack Ruby owned, Jack was in the booth with 3 other guys, and Jack got all upset and was bawling the gal out because of the fact that the food wasn't right, wasn't what he ordered, and made a big ruckus over it. And I guess it was a couple of nights later that when the Kennedy assassination occurred, that when the paper came out with the pictures of Tippit and Oswald, she went to Pete Lucas. She said, "Those are 2 of the guys that were in the booth with Jack Ruby that night." The 4th party believed to be a part of the assassination team. This tape you really need. It's pretty good.